Okay, for this deep dive, we're jumping into 2 Samuel chapter 24. It's quite a chapter.
It really is. Full of surprising events, some really tough choices, and, well, pretty profound consequences.
Yeah, it kicks off in a way that immediately makes you pause.
Right. The text says, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel. That's the starting point. And that anger somehow incited David against them.
Okay, wait. So God's angry with the nation, Israel, and this leads to the king, David, doing something. What does he do?
He commands Joab, his, top general,
Right.
and the army commanders. Tells them to go through all the tribes, from Dan way up north down to Beersheba in the south.
And do what?
Count the fighting men. Take a census of the military strength.
A census. Seems straightforward enough, maybe a bit administrative, but Joab's reaction tells a different story, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Joab, who's usually pretty pragmatic, even ruthless sometimes,
Yeah.
he pushes back right away.
What does he say?
He asks David point blank, why does my lord the king want to do such a thing? He even adds this blessing, like, may the Lord multiply your troops 100 times over. Clearly showing he thinks it's unnecessary, maybe even wrong.
That's a huge red flag, Joab questioning a direct order like that. It suggests this isn't just standard military procedure.
Exactly. It hints that maybe David's motive isn't purely strategic, pride perhaps, or a lack of trust in God's provision. We don't know for sure, but Joab sees something wrong.
But David doesn't back down.
Nope. The text is really clear. The king's word, however, overruled Joab and the army commanders. David's mind was made up. Joab had to do it.
And this wasn't like a quick afternoon job, right? Counting everyone across the whole kingdom?
Oh, definitely not. It was a massive undertaking. Think about the logistics back then. The source actually details their route pretty carefully.
Yeah, I remember reading that. They crossed the Jordan, went through Gad, Jazer, Gilead, Tatim Hachi, way up to Dan Jane towards Sidon.
The fortress of Tyre, Hivite, and Canaanite towns.
And finally ended up way down south in Beersheba, in the Negev of Judah. It sounds exhausting just listing it.
And it took time. A lot of time.
How long exactly?
The text gives a precise figure, 9 months and 20 days.
Wow. Almost 10 months, just traveling and counting?
It really emphasizes the scale of the effort, the determination behind the command. It wasn't a whim. It was a sustained, kingdom-wide project.
So after nearly 10 months, Joab finally comes back. What are the numbers?
He reports 800,000 able-bodied men who could handle a sword in Israel.
800,000.
And 500,000 men in Judah.
So that's 1.3 million fighting men in total?
Yep, a huge army. Represents the peak of David's power, really, a formidable force.
And just as Joab delivers these impressive numbers, something shifts dramatically.
Instantly, the text says, right after hearing the tally, David's heart struck him. He was conscience-stricken.
So the goal is achieved, the numbers are in, and that's when the guilt hits him. Not before, not during, but right at the end.
Exactly. It's like the reality of the completed action suddenly brought the weight of his transgression crashing down.
What does he do?
He immediately confesses to God, says, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, O Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing. He owns it completely. Sin and foolishness.
That's quite a turnaround. He recognizes his mistake the second it's done. But the consequences aren't avoided just by confessing, right?
No. The divine response is incredibly fast. Before David even gets up the next morning, the word of the Lord comes to Gad the prophet.
Gad, his seer, okay.
And Gad delivers a message. It's essentially, okay, you've sinned, you've confessed, but there's still consequences, and you have a choice.
A choice of punishment. That seems unusual.
It is. Gad presents David with 3 options, straight from the Lord.
3 terrible options, I imagine. What were they?
Option 1, 3 years of famine across the land. Option 2, 3 months of David fleeing from his enemies while they hunt him down. Option 3, 3 days of plague sweeping through Israel. Famine, flight, or plague. David has to choose.
Wow. Each one means immense suffering for his people caused by his action. How does he possibly choose?
The text says he's in deep distress, understandably. But his choice is really telling about how he views God versus humans.
What does he pick?
He chooses the 3 days of plague.
The plague? Why?
His reasoning is specific. He says, let us fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is great, but do not let me fall into the hands of men.
So he'd rather face God's judgment directly, trusting in God's mercy, even in punishment, than face the cruelty or potential lack of mercy from human enemies.
Precisely. It's a profound statement of trust, even in the face of disaster. He puts himself and his people entirely in God's hands.
And does the plague happen?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
swiftly and devastatingly. The Lord sends the plague, just as chosen.
How bad is it?
It's horrific. 70,000 people die.
70,000.
Yes. Across the whole land, the text specifies from Dan to Beersheba, the same area covered by the census. It lasts from that morning until the time designated, the end of the 3 days.
70,000 lives lost in just 3 days because of his decision. That's staggering.
It truly is. The plague is so intense it reaches the capital, Jerusalem. The angel carrying out the judgment stretches out his hand, ready to destroy the city itself.
But something stops it.
Yes. Another crucial turning point. The Lord sees the destruction, sees the angel poised over Jerusalem, and the text says he is grieved because of the calamity.
God grieves over the suffering.
Apparently so. And he
Yeah.
commands the angel, enough, withdraw your hand.
And the angel stops. Where?
Right there. At a specific, seemingly mundane place, the threshing floor of a man named Araunah the Jebusite.
A threshing floor, like where they process grain. Not a palace, not the tabernacle, but a workspace.
Exactly. An ordinary place becomes the site where divine judgment halts. And David actually sees the angel there, the one striking down the people.
How does he react to seeing that?
His response is immediate and powerful. He cries out to the Lord, taking full responsibility again, but even more intensely this time.
What does he say?
He says, I am the one who has sinned and done wrong. These are but sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall upon me and my family. He pleaded for the punishment to be on him, not the innocent people.
Wow. He really steps up there, offering himself.
He does. And right then, Gad the prophet comes back to him.
With another message.
An instruction this time. Go up and build an altar to the Lord. Right there, on that threshing floor, the place where the plague stopped.
Okay. So David needs to acquire this threshing floor from Araunah.
Right. He goes to Araunah. Araunah sees the king coming, bows down respectfully. David explains why he's there. I need to buy your threshing floor to build an altar so this plague will stop.
How does Araunah respond? He's a Jebusite, right? Not even an Israelite.
Correct. But his response is incredibly generous. He basically says, take it. Take whatever you need. Here are oxen for the burnt offering. Here are the threshing sledges and yokes for the firewood. He offers the land, the animals, the fuel, everything, for free.
He just offers it all to the king.
Yes. The text even emphasizes it. Araunah gives all this to the king. An amazing gesture.
But David, he doesn't accept it for free, does he?
No. And this is absolutely key. David refuses the free gift. He insists, no, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing.
That cost him nothing. That's the crucial part.
Exactly. He understands that for the atonement to be genuine, for the sacrifice to mean something in turning away God's wrath after his sin, it has to come at a personal cost to him. A freebie wouldn't cut it.
So does he buy it?
He does. He pays Araunah 50 shekels of silver for the threshing floor and the oxen, a specific price for a specific, now sacred piece of land.
And then he builds the altar.
Yes. Builds the altar right there. Offers burnt offerings and fellowship offerings just as commanded. The burnt offerings symbolizing atonement. The fellowship offerings communion restored.
And does it work? Does the plague stop?
It does. The final sentence of the chapter says, Then the Lord answered prayer in behalf of the land, and the plague on Israel was stopped. The act of obedience, the costly sacrifice on that specific spot, brings the calamity to an end.
Wow. What a roller coaster in one chapter. Sin, consequence, choice, suffering, repentance, sacrifice, and finally, relief.
It packs a lot in.
So, thinking about this whole narrative,
Right.
What does it mean for you listening today? There's some powerful themes here.
Definitely. One big one is leadership accountability. David the king makes a choice. It leads to disaster. He's held responsible, and importantly, he accepts that responsibility. He doesn't blame Joab or anyone else. He even offers himself up. It really speaks to the weight of leadership.
And the idea that actions, even seemingly practical ones like a census, can have unintended massive consequences. What seemed like assessing military strength was seen as a deep spiritual failure, maybe pride or lack of faith. It makes you think about the hidden motives or potential fallout behind our own logistical decisions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then there's the complex interplay of divine justice and mercy. The judgment is incredibly severe, 70,000 deaths. Yet God also grieves, provides a way out, and David banks on his mercy even when choosing the punishment. It's not a simple picture. Justice and compassion are somehow held together.
And that point about the cost of atonement, David had to pay. Araunah's free offer, though generous, wasn't sufficient for what David needed to do. Real sacrifice, real reconciliation, it seems, often requires a genuine personal cost. You can't just offer something that costs you nothing when seeking to mend such a significant breach.
Yeah, that detail really stands out. Along with Joab's warning at the start, the sheer scale of the numbers, both the census count and the death, told the speed of the plague compared to the length of the census, the angel stopping at such an ordinary place.
Araunah's generosity, David's refusal, it all builds this incredibly textured story.
It links the king's choice, the prophet's word, a national catastrophe, and finally, a very personal, costly act of sacrifice that brings healing.
So here's something to think about. This whole sequence, from a census driven perhaps by pride through immense suffering, to a sacrifice that had to have personal cost. What does this tell you about the ripple effects of our own choices, especially those made from positions of influence, and what true responsibility in making amends might actually involve?